I've installed a lot of rifle barrels on actions over the years. In this video, I'm going to show you some of the tools, the processes, some tips and tricks, and something unexpected at the end. Gavin here from ultimatereloader.com. It is time to talk barrel installs, right? We're talking about what the process is, what the tools are, some tips and tricks that'll help you get this done more effectively and more efficiently, and hopefully without damaging anything. And then finally, I've got something completely different that I've been doing lately that I'll show you at the very end of the video, so make sure you stay tuned to the very end. Okay, so fundamentally, you've got the action, right? The receiver body itself, and you've got your barrel. And in general, you're going to take the receiver. The barrel is held by the barrel vise. The receiver is screwed on. And then you're going to take some sort of wrench and tighten the receiver onto the barrel. I typically tighten everything to 90 foot-pounds. It's enough torque where your barrel and your receiver will not unscrew from each other, but it's not so much that it's inconvenient or overly burdensome to remove the receiver from the barrel. So that's the process we're talking about. And the experience can span a bunch of different complexity levels, from very routine, which I prefer, to, oh my word, I can't even get this action off of the barrel. I need to part off the barrel in the lathe, the most extreme measure I've heard of. I haven't had to do it myself. I've come close on factory actions in barrels that were installed at the factory, but I have not had to so far. So what's important is to know what equipment you need and what the process looks like, and then finally some tips and tricks that will help you get this done smoothly and efficiently. Okay, so fundamentally we start with the barrel vise, right? This is some sort of clamping mechanism that's going to hold the barrel securely while we screw the receiver and torque it or untorque it and unscrew it from the barrel. My original setup was this Brownell's barrel vise, which has got a heavy duty clamp, 4 bolts that hold the top down to the bottom, and it uses these inserts, these bushings, which are available with predefined barrel shank diameters, you know, your 1.25, your 1.2, your 1.1, and so on and so forth. And they're even available with tapered interior surfaces. This unit I had to use recently. I've stopped using this as my primary barrel vise, but it does have a 1 3/4 inch OD on these bushings, which happened to be the barrel shank diameter for the 50 BMG build that you saw me do recently. So this is a very heavy duty unit. You can tighten things down really tight, but it's a little bit slower and a little bit more cumbersome to use compared to these short action customs barrel vices. The Bravo, which I've got down at my other shop, and the short action customs modular barrel vise, which both use these bushing sets here that have these kind of anti-spin nubs that have corresponding surfaces on the interior of the jaws. And the Bravo works great. There's 2 bolts that you use to tighten it down, and it's spring-loaded, so it kind of opens itself. But I do prefer the modular because it's so quick to open and close and then to torque down. So different options, different pros and cons for each, but right now I'm using the modular up here at the Ultimate Reloader Mountain Shop, and I'm using the Bravo down at my store, which is called Precision Rifle Concepts. So you're going to need a barrel vise. It secures the barrel, but then you're also going to need an action wrench, and what I've got here is kind of a smattering of different types, but there's 2 fundamental styles, external and internal. External action wrenches are really handy for 2 specific scenarios. One, I've got a whole bunch of torque I need to apply to this to get a factory action off of a factory barrel that was torqued down at the factory. Sometimes they're sort of glued in place with sealant type stuff and whatnot. And you could see as high as 250 foot-pounds of torque required to get these off. They can be an absolute bear. And as I mentioned, the extreme case is needing to part off the barrel right next to the shoulder on the lathe to relieve that compression from that factory tightening, right? Evidently, the lawyers don't want barrels flying off of people's guns, which I don't think is a huge risk. So by grabbing the outside of the action, you can apply more torque and remove barrels that are super stubborn. The other reason you might want an exterior action wrench is you can see here I've done some custom fitting for a particular recoil lug. I believe this was for the 224 Valkyrie bolt action rifle build. And I was able to properly orient the recoil lug with respect to the action to clock it appropriately by holding it with the action wrench cutout. If you have a pinned recoil lug, that solves that problem, not an issue, but this can be an aid in that particular instance. Okay, so they take a little bit longer to use. They can be larger, they take up more space. You can also scratch the barrel and or the receiver, so extra care is needed, but these tools do have their place. The interior style is great because they're really easy to use. So this, for instance, is the one for the Terminus. Just put it in, make sure it says top. It goes in, it locks in, and it's going to lock properly if we have the barrel in place. And we can tighten or loosen the action, and there you go. The problem with these proprietary styles is they take up a lot of space in your drawer, and you're going to need to buy one for different actions, right? So that's where the Short Action Customs modular action wrench comes in handy. This tool I've been using exclusively whenever possible because it's got these replaceable heads which don't take up a lot of room and they're not expensive. They just come off like that, put a different one on, screw the bumper in place, and you're good to go. So I have not memorized these. I'm going to actually grab my piece of paper and read off all of the options that you have. Model 1, Remington 700 and similar. Model 2, Winchester Model 70. Model 3, Mousingfield from American Rifle Company. Model 4, Bat TR and similar. Model 5, Tikka T3. Model 6, Howa 1500, Borden Actions, and Kelbley's Model number 7, Bighorn TL, SR, and Origin Actions. Gunworks, GLR, left and right, Savage Small Shank. Model 8, American Rifle Company, Nucleus and Archimedes. Model 9, Curtis Custom Actions. Model 10, Defiance Elite, Pierce and 2-bore. Model 11, Defiance for 3/4 inch diameter bolts, Surgeon XL. Model 12, Seiko A7. Model 13, Surgeon 591. Model number 14 for Terminus Actions. Model 15 for Seiko TRG. And Model 20 for Macmillan TAC 50. Okay, so that just gives you an idea of all of the different actions that you can work with this Short Action Customs modular action wrench. I actually recently got all of these heads, the replaceable heads, because now that I'm starting to do custom work, I never know what's going to come in the door. This video is brought to you by the Colorado School of Trades. If you want to learn hands-on gunsmithing, schooloftrades.edu. Okay, so let me walk through with you the way that I install barrels here at Ultimate Reloader. First, we're going to take the barrel and we're going to get a diameter on the shank area, right up next to where it's threaded on the tenon. 1.230. Okay, so that's for my 6 Creed barrel, which we're going to start with here. So I'm actually going to use the 1.250 because we're going to use a little bit of drywall tape. This is one of the tricks that I learned from the guys over at Short Action Customs. You can see I have a whole roll of it there. So we're going to put a little wrap on that. We've got our bushings in place. I'm just going to swing that over, bring our bolt down. And Short Action Customs recommends a torque wrench here, but I kind of know where things need to be, so I just use a T-handle. Wouldn't be a bad idea to start with a torque wrench though. Okay, so that's tight now. We're going to get our receiver ready to go. No bolt in place. I'm going to take some TW25B. The guys at Bat Machine got me turned on to that. Put a little bit of extra grease on the threads there. This acts like an anti-seize. Okay, and then screw the receiver on. Now, one thing I'll do sometimes, if it's critical, if I'm checking headspace, for instance, is I will actually keep this loose and I'll clock things so that the ejection port essentially is facing up, but that's not going to be critical here. And look at that, we're actually pretty close there. Okay, So then we need to get the appropriate head installed on the modular action wrench. So I'm going to take my number 1 off, that was for Remington 700, and put number 14 on, put our bumper in place. You notice it's marked top here. We want to make sure that that goes in like so. All right, now we've got our torque wrench. The torque wrench is set to 90 foot-pounds, remember? And I just need to tighten. That is it. Okay, so I'm actually going to take this back off because I've got another demo coming at the end of the video. So I'm going to go run and get my other wrench. Be right back. I've heard from some people that loosening with the torque wrench is not good.
Avoid the negative comments here.
Okay, so we're going to just use the breaker bar here. Pop that. This would be your typical teardown procedure. Okay, get the receiver off. Put the bolt back in if we want to. And then we loosen our hold down bolt. Pop that down. I'm going to open this and kind of hold the bushing so it doesn't go flying. Boom, there we go. Okay, so some tips and tricks here. One is drywall tape. The second is powdered rosin. If you're using bushings and you need to take up some space, remember we were at 1.230, and if we have a 1.250 bushing and we don't have the drywall tape, we can just throw a whole bunch of powdered resin in there. And it does a couple things. A, it grips with incredible strength. It prevents the slippage big time. And second, it protects surfaces. So if you've got Cerakote or if you've got a blued barrel that you don't want scratched, a good layer of rosin and an oversized bushing can definitely help in that particular situation. And the third thing is, when I was taking Gordy Gritter's class, he tightened a barrel with a cheater bar on the Allen key with this style of barrel vise. And I was just a little bit taken back, and he was just giving it, torquing down all 4 of the bolts. And because we had a really stubborn situation and didn't want slippage. That kind of shocked me a little bit, but what I learned from that is these barrel vise bushings provide very even pressure on the barrel, right? Force is different than pressure. So you can crank things down quite a bit. Now be careful with your modular barrel vise. You can torque it quite far, but there are limits given the toggle bolt design for that. Again, extreme situations, hopefully you don't encounter those a lot. And for everyday work, I'm really liking the short action customs gear. But if you recall, I have something special to show you. This is pretty cool. Let's go over to the lathe. So here I have a 6.5 Creedmoor barrel. And if we want to install that, we can use the lathe. That's right. This is something that I just started doing as a part of some of the larger format work for ELR guns. But I have found that this can be very handy, and it's changed the way that I do my chambering. I'll get to that in just a second. The 6-jaw chuck applies even pressure, and as we tighten this, it's going to bring the barrel up straight in the spindle. I'm in neutral, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to torque this down pretty well. Yep. Okay. Now, we're going to put a little bit of grease on these threads again with our TW25B. I've already got some on there. Just give it a little top coat. Screw on the action. I kind of feel like I'm chambering a rifle right now because the action goes on and off usually multiple times to check things, right? Okay, so then we get things indexed. I'm going to put it in medium range here. We're going to get our action wrench, look for top. Top goes in towards the Picatinny. And then if I step on the brake, I should be able to torque things down here. Okay, so we are torqued down now. Now, you have to apply a fair bit of force with your chuck jaws, but now we can take everything out of the lathe. go install the barreled action in our rifle, and we're good to go. So there you go. My barrel installation techniques, a bit about barrel vices, action wrenches, some other supplies, tips, and tricks. I will note this is a heavy-duty lathe, and if you're not comfortable with 90 foot-pounds going through the gears and through the headstock, definitely don't do this. But what's been really handy about this technique for me is I'm able to check headspace with the receiver torqued onto the barrel and to know exactly where things will land when I do my final tightening. That is really reassuring, rather than hoping that you're close and hoping that the crush brings things into place. And again, if you want to learn more about gunsmithing, if you want to be a professional gunsmith, you're going to want to check out the Colorado School of Trades, schooloftrades.edu. Here's what I'd like to know from you is what equipment and what tools and what processes do you use to install receivers on barrels? Drop a comment and we'll start a discussion. That concludes this video, and that means it's time to wrap it up. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, we're on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, where we've got unrestricted content, and Instagram. Make sure to follow us on all those channels. Ultimate Reloader also has a commercial solutions division serving law enforcement, the military, and the gun industry. We have some unique capabilities, including a comprehensive suite of recoil testing and evaluation capabilities, trigger profiling, and more. If you're interested in custom rifles like what we build here on the channel or gunsmithing services, you're going to want to go to rifles.ultimatereloader.com and get on the wait list. If you want to learn lucrative gunsmithing like what I show here on the channel, including building custom rifles and Cerakote plus a whole bunch more, you're going to want to check out the Colorado School of Trades, schooloftrades.edu. Thanks again for watching.